15 experts failed. Only the poor janitor girl solved it in 30 seconds. The steel briefcase sat on the mahogany table like a death sentence. 15 of the country's most brilliant minds surrounded it, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. A Korean Mafia boss named Kang Min-ho stood at the head of the room, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. The digital timer on the wall showed 9 minutes and 43 seconds remaining. "If we can't open it in 10 minutes, we're all dead," whispered Dr. Lee, a renowned cryptographer whose hands trembled as he adjusted his glasses for the 100th time. The room smelled of sweat and desperation. Every expert had tried their approach. Every single one had failed. In the corner of the underground conference room, a young black woman in a faded gray janitor's uniform pushed her mop slowly across the marble floor. Her name was Amara, and to everyone in that room, she was invisible. Just another poor worker cleaning up, after the powerful. She kept her eyes down, her movements quiet, her presence forgettable. But Amara was listening. She was always listening. "You're all wrong," she said softly, her voice barely cutting through the panicked whispers. "It's not a code." The room fell silent. 15 pairs of eyes turned toward her with a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. Kang Min-ho's expression darkened. "What did you say?" Amara's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her face calm. This was the moment that would either save them all or get her killed, and deep down, she knew exactly which one it would be. 3 months earlier, Amara's life had been simple in its misery. She was 22 years old, orphaned at 7, and had spent the last 15 years surviving in the cracks of Seoul's underground economy. Her home was a basement room so small she could touch both walls with her arms outstretched. The ceiling leaked when it rained, the heating barely worked in winter, but it was hers, and she paid for it with 14-hour shifts cleaning office buildings that housed people who would never know her name. As a black woman in Korea, Amara had learned early that invisibility could be both curse and shield. People looked through her, made assumptions, dismissed her before she even spoke. The microaggressions were constant but subtle. The stares on the subway, the way shop owners watched her more carefully, the automatic assumption that she couldn't speak Korean, even though it was the only language she'd ever known fluently. Her father had been American, a brilliant strategist who'd come to Korea for work and never left. Her mother had been Korean, beautiful and kind, who'd fallen in love with a foreigner and paid the price in whispers and judgment. Amara had inherited her father's dark skin and her mother's delicate features, belonging fully to neither world. Every night, Amara took the service elevator to the top floors of the Hanseong Group building. She emptied trash cans, scrubbed toilets, and mopped conference rooms where decisions worth billions were made. The executives never looked at her. The security guards barely nodded. She wore the uniform of invisibility, and it had become her greatest asset. Because while Amara cleaned, she observed, she noticed which executives left confidential documents on their desks. She saw the security camera blind spots. She memorized the patterns of who arrived early and who stayed late, and when she returned to her cramped basement room each night, she filled notebooks with everything she'd learned. Strange symbols, security codes she'd glimpsed over shoulders, floor plans sketched from memory, mathematical equations that reminded her of something from long ago, something she'd tried hard to forget. Her father had taught her to see patterns. Before he disappeared 15 years ago, before her world collapsed into poverty and loneliness, he'd spent hours with her solving puzzles. Not children's puzzles, but complex mechanical riddles that required lateral thinking and patience. "The answer is never where people look first," he'd told her once, his gentle hands guiding hers as she struggled with a locked wooden box. "Most people solve with force. Smart people solve with observation." She'd been 7 when he vanished. The police said he'd probably left the country, abandoned his family. Her mother had died 2 years later from a broken heart and unpaid medical bills. Amara had been alone ever since, navigating a society that saw her as perpetually foreign despite being born on Korean soil. But her father's puzzles remained in her mind like ghosts, whispering solutions to problems no one asked her to solve. The crisis began on a Tuesday night when Kang Min-ho's organization discovered a problem that could destroy them. One of their former masterminds, a man known only as the Architect, had died 3 weeks earlier under mysterious circumstances. Before his death, he'd sealed critical information inside a custom-made steel briefcase and left it with specific instructions. Open it correctly, and you survive. Fail, and everything goes to the authorities. The briefcase was unlike anything the Mafia had seen. It had no visible keypad, no fingerprint scanner, no traditional lock mechanism. The surface was smooth steel with only a small LED light that glowed red. Every attempt to force it open triggered a countdown system. The experts theorized it had internal sensors that detected tampering and pressure changes. Kang Min-ho had no choice but to assemble the best minds money could buy. He summoned 15 experts from different fields. There was Dr. Lee, the cryptographer, Professor Choi, who specialized in symbolic logic and ancient codes, a former military strategist named Colonel Park, who understood psychological warfare, a master hacker called Ghost, who'd broken into government databases, engineers, mathematicians, physicists, each with credentials that filled entire walls. They worked in shifts for 72 hours straight. The hacker tried brute force algorithmic approaches. The engineer attempted to map the internal mechanisms with ultrasound. The psychologist theorized it required understanding the architect's mindset. Each theory led nowhere. Amara cleaned the conference room every 6 hours. She brought coffee, emptied ashtrays, and remained silent. But she watched everything. She saw how the experts all approached the briefcase the same way, standing directly in front of it, treating it as an opponent to be defeated. She noticed the floor markings beneath the table, strange grooves in the marble that everyone ignored. She observed how the room's exit light reflected off the briefcase's surface at certain angles, and she remembered her father's voice. The answer is never where people look first. By the 4th day, tempers were exploding. Colonel Park threw a chair against the wall after his psychological approach failed. "This is impossible. The architect designed it to be unsolvable." "Then we're finished," Kang Min-ho said coldly. "If this information reaches the authorities, we all spend life in prison." Dr. Lee wiped his forehead. "There has to be something we're missing. A pattern, a clue, anything." Ghost, the hacker, laughed bitterly. "We've tried everything. Mathematics, physics, psychology, brute force. This isn't a puzzle. It's a trap." One of the junior experts, a young mathematician named Kim, spoke up nervously. "What if we're overthinking it? What if the solution is simpler than we imagine?" Professor Choi turned on him savagely. "Simple? Do you think the architect would create something simple? He was a genius. This requires genius-level thinking." Kang Min-ho's patience finally broke. He pointed at Kim. "Get him out of here. I don't pay for worthless theories." 2 guards dragged the mathematician from the room. His protests echoed down the hallway, before being cut off by a closing door. The remaining experts exchanged nervous glances. The message was clear. Failure had consequences. Amara continued mopping, her movements slow and deliberate. She'd positioned herself near the wall where she could see the entire room. The timer showed 18 hours remaining. The experts were exhausted, running on caffeine and fear. Their thinking had become rigid, desperate. She'd seen this pattern before. When her father gave her impossible puzzles, she'd spend hours trying complex solutions. And he'd always smile and say, "You're working too hard. Sometimes the lock opens when you stop trying to force it." The memory crystallized into understanding. Amara set down her mop and took a quiet breath. This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for without knowing it. The moment that would change everything. "It opens when you stop trying to open it," she said softly. The reaction was immediate. Professor Choi spun around, his face red with anger. "What did you just say?" Amara kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The briefcase. You're all trying to solve it like it's a code or a mechanism. But what if it's designed to open only when you demonstrate patience? when you stop treating it as an opponent. Ghost laughed harshly. You're a janitor. What could you possibly know about high-level cryptography? She knows nothing, Colonel Park said dismissively, his eyes not quite meeting hers. The unspoken words hung in the air between them. What could she possibly know? A black woman pushing a mop? But Kang Min-ho held up his hand. His eyes were cold and calculating as he studied Amara. Explain yourself quickly. Amara walked slowly toward the table. Every expert watched her with expressions ranging from contempt to curiosity. She pointed at the floor markings. These grooves, they're alignment guides. And the exit light, see how it reflects off the surface? The briefcase is a directional lock. Directional? Dr. Lee frowned. That's absurd. No, Amara continued, her confidence growing. The architect knew you'd all stand in front of it, studying it like an enemy. But what if the answer is in positioning? Rotate the briefcase away from observers. Align it with the room's natural light source. Then wait. Demonstrate that you're not trying to force entry. Show patience. The room erupted in arguments. Half the experts called it ridiculous. The other half were too exhausted to care. Professor Choi slammed his fist on the table. We're listening to cleaning staff now? This is madness. But Kang Min-ho's expression had changed. He'd known the architect personally. The old man had always valued patience above intelligence, observation above force. Let her try. Boss, you can't be serious, Colonel Park protested. We have 15 minutes left. If she's wrong, we were dead anyway. Kang Min-ho interrupted. Do it. Amara's hands were steady as she approached the briefcase. She could feel 15 pairs of eyes boring into her back. The timer showed 14 minutes and 37 seconds. She gently rotated the briefcase 90 degrees counterclockwise, away from where the experts had been standing. Then she aligned its front edge with the reflection point from the exit light. The room held its breath. Amara stepped back and clasped her hands in front of her. Now we wait. 30 seconds of complete stillness. This is insane, someone muttered, but no one moved. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 25. Click. The sound was soft but unmistakable. The LED light on the briefcase changed from red to green. A seam appeared along its edge, and the lid opened slightly, releasing a soft hiss of pressurized air. Dead silence filled the room. Then chaos erupted. The experts rushed forward, talking over each other, demanding to know how she'd known. Kang Min-ho simply stared at this open briefcase, then at Amara, his expression unreadable. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think happens next. Your support keeps these stories coming, and we read every single comment. Amara thought she'd be thanked, maybe even rewarded. Instead, within 30 seconds of the briefcase opening, 2 guards seized her arms. She was pulled from the conference room and shoved into a smaller, windowless office. Kang Min-ho entered alone, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. Sit down, he commanded. Amara sat in the metal chair, her mind racing. This wasn't gratitude. This was interrogation. Kang Min-ho circled her slowly like a predator. How did you know? And don't tell me you guessed. Nobody guesses that specifically. I told you. The patterns, the alignment. 15 experts with advanced degrees couldn't see those patterns, but a janitor did? His voice was cold, dangerous. That means either you're the smartest person in this building, or you had prior knowledge. Which is it? Amara met his eyes. I'm not a spy, if that's what you're asking. Then explain yourself, now, because right now you look like a plant. Someone sent here to infiltrate my organization, and we handle spies very permanently. Her throat felt dry, but she forced herself to speak calmly. My father taught me. He built puzzles like that, for fun. Kang Min-ho stopped circling. Your father? He died when I was 7. But before that, he was obsessed with mechanical puzzles. the kind that required lateral thinking. He used to say most people solve with force when they should solve with observation. The memories came flooding back, painful and sharp. I watched him create boxes that opened only when you stopped trying. Locks that responded to patience instead of pressure. Your father's name? Marcus Webb. The name hung in the air like a bomb. Kang Min-ho's face went pale. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking rapidly in low tones. Within 5 minutes, 2 more men entered the room carrying a tablet. They showed Kang Min-ho something that made his expression shift from suspicion to shock. Marcus Webb, he said slowly. The architect. Amara felt like the floor had dropped beneath her. What? Kang Min-ho turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a photo from 15 years ago. A black man in an expensive suit, standing beside younger versions of various crime bosses. And there, unmistakable despite the years, was her father. Your father didn't die, Kang Min-ho said. He disappeared. Marcus Webb was the legendary strategist who designed our most secure systems. He created the framework that kept this organization invisible for 2 decades. Then one day, he vanished without explanation. We assumed he'd been killed by rivals. Amara stared at the photo, her mind reeling. All those years of poverty, of struggling, of believing her father had abandoned them. That's impossible. My father was... He worked in puzzles, yes, but he wasn't... He was everything you didn't know, an American who came to Korea and became indispensable to us. And apparently, he taught you more than either of you realized. Kang Min-ho sat down across from her. The briefcase you just opened? He designed it. Before he disappeared, he created dozens of security systems for us. Each one incorporated his philosophy. Patience beats force. Observation beats intelligence. The implications crashed over Amara like waves. Her father had been part of this world, a criminal world, and he'd left her with skills that had just saved a room full of criminals. Why did he leave? She asked quietly. We never knew. But now... Kang Min-ho studied her carefully. Now I think he left to protect you, to keep you away from this life. A black man with a half-Korean daughter in this country, in this business. He knew what kind of target that would make you. The irony was crushing. Her father had abandoned his criminal empire to save her from it, and she'd ended up here anyway, solving his puzzles for the same people he'd fled. Kang Min-ho stood and walked to the door. Wait here. He returned 20 minutes later with the 15 experts, all of them looking confused and anxious. Kang Min-ho addressed them without preamble. You're all fired, effective immediately. You'll receive your contracted severance, and you'll sign NDAs that will follow you to your graves. Professor Choi sputtered in outrage. You can't... We spent 4 days. You spent 4 days failing. She solved it in 30 seconds. Kang Min-ho turned to Amara. We're offering you a position. Head of Strategic Security. Salary is 20 times what you make cleaning floors. Protection, resources, anything you need. The experts erupted in protest, but guards escorted them out one by one. Soon, Amara was alone with Kang. Min-ho again. I'm a janitor, she said numbly. I don't know anything about running security. You know how your father thought. That's worth more than 15 PhDs. He slid a contract across the table. Sign this, and you'll never worry about money again. You'll have power, respect, everything you've been denied your entire life. Amara stared at the paper. The numbers were staggering, life-changing. She thought about her basement room, the leaking ceiling, the 14-hour shifts. She thought about all the times she'd been invisible, ignored, dismissed as worthless. The casual racism that had followed her since childhood. The assumptions people made about her intelligence, her capability, her worth. But she also thought about her father's face in that photo, the expensive suit, the association with criminals, and she thought about her mother, who died in poverty while her father had been living in luxury with the Mafia. I need time to think, she said. Kang Min-ho's expression hardened. You don't get time. You either accept protection or you become a liability. Those are the only options when you know what you know. The threat was clear. Sign or die. Amara felt trapped, cornered by the very intelligence that had freed the briefcase. Her mind raced through possibilities, searching for the pattern, the lateral solution. "I'll sign," she said finally, "on one condition. You're not in a position to negotiate. I want access to everything my father created, every puzzle, every system, every design. I want to understand what he built." Kang Min-ho considered this. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to replace him, I need to know how he thought. Completely." It was partly true, but Amara had another reason, one she kept hidden behind her calm expression. If her father had left clues, breadcrumbs to explain why he'd abandoned her, they would be hidden in his work. And if there was a way out of this life, a way to escape the trap she'd just walked into, those clues would show her how. "Agreed," Kang Min-ho said. He produced a pen. Amara signed her name, and with it, signed away the simple misery of her old life for something far more complicated. Over the next 3 weeks, Amara was transformed. Her basement room was replaced with a luxury apartment overlooking Seoul. Her janitor's uniform was replaced with tailored suits. She was given an office, a team, and access to files that documented her father's 15-year legacy with the organization. She studied everything obsessively: security systems, encrypted communications, physical puzzles that protected safe houses and weapons caches. Each design bore her father's signature philosophy. The obvious solution was always wrong, but she was also searching for something else: hidden messages, coded warnings, anything that explained why he'd left. She found it on the 22nd day, buried in the schematics for a warehouse security system, a sequence of numbers that didn't match any lock combination. She recognized it immediately: her childhood birthday, her mother's birthday, and a third date she didn't recognize. She cross-referenced the third date and felt her breath catch. It was the day her father had disappeared. And when she converted that date into coordinates using a cipher he'd taught her years ago, it pointed to a location in Busan. Amara realized then that her father hadn't just left. He'd left a trail, a puzzle only she could solve. And the final piece was waiting in Busan. But getting there meant betraying Kang Min-ho's trust. It meant using the resources he'd given her against him. It meant playing the same game her father had played, appearing loyal while planning escape. She scheduled a business trip to inspect security at their Busan operations. Kang Min-ho approved it without suspicion. Why would he? She'd proven herself invaluable. In 3 weeks, she'd redesigned 2 major security systems and uncovered a mole in their ranks. She was the golden asset, the genius daughter of the architect. On the train to Busan, Amara stared out the window and wondered what she'd find. Her father? Unlikely after 15 years. A message? Possible? A way out? She could only hope. The coordinates led to an old industrial building near the harbor. Inside, behind a false wall, she found a small room, and in that room was a video recording device with a single file, dated the day her father disappeared. With trembling hands, she pressed play. Her father's face appeared on the screen, older than she remembered, but unmistakably him. His dark skin showed signs of stress, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there in her childhood memories. "Amara," he said, and her eyes filled with tears at the sound of his voice. "If you're watching this, it means you've inherited my curse. You see patterns others miss. You solve what others can't. And that means they've found you." He paused, his expression heavy with regret. "I built this organization's security, and in doing so, I became trapped in it. The only way to leave was to make myself worthless. So I destroyed my own work. Every system I'd built, I left with a fatal flaw, a backdoor only I knew, and then I vanished before they could force me to fix it." Amara's mind raced. Fatal flaws, backdoors. Her father had sabotaged everything. "I couldn't take you with me because they would have hunted us both. A black man running from the Korean Mafia with a mixed-race child? We wouldn't have lasted a week. So I left you in poverty, hoping you'd blend in, stay invisible, have a normal life. But I see now that was foolish. You're watching this, which means you found them, or they found you. His eyes, even through the recording, seemed to look directly into her soul. "The briefcase you opened to get here. Yes, I knew they'd use it eventually. That was my final test, to see if you'd learned, to see if you were ready." "Ready for what?" Amara whispered at the screen. "Every system I built has a shutdown code, a master override that dismantles everything. The locations of these codes are hidden in the same puzzles I gave you as a child. Remember the wooden box with 7 chambers? The metal sphere that opened in spirals? Each one corresponds to a system." Amara's breath caught. She still had those puzzles stored in a box under her old bed. "You have a choice, Amara. You can use these codes to free yourself and destroy the organization from within. Or you can become what I almost became, their most valuable prisoner. Choose wisely, and forgive me for leaving you with this burden. I love you, baby girl. I always did." The video ended. Amara sat in silence, her world rewritten once again. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He'd set her free and left her the keys to finish his escape. She had the power to destroy everything Kang Minho had built, to avenge the 15 years of poverty and pain, to complete her father's work, but she also had something else, a choice. Before we get to the ending, if you've made it this far, you're part of our amazing community. Please take 1 second to like this video and let us know in the comments what choice you think Amara should make. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who love them as much as you do. Amara returned to Seoul with the video file encrypted on a secure drive. She maintained her routine perfectly, attending meetings, reviewing security protocols, appearing every bit the loyal asset. But every night, she studied her father's childhood puzzles and extracted the hidden codes. The wooden box with 7 chambers revealed the shutdown sequence for their communication network. The metal sphere contained the override for their financial tracking systems. The crystal pyramid, which she'd always thought was just beautiful, held the keys to every physical security system in their properties. Within 2 months, she had everything. Every backdoor, every fatal flaw, every master code her father had hidden. She could bring down the entire organization with a few keystrokes. And then came the moment she'd been both dreading and anticipating. Kang Minho's annual strategy meeting, where all the bosses gathered to review operations. She was invited to present on security improvements. As she stood before 20 of the most dangerous criminals in Korea, the only black woman in a room full of men who'd built empires on violence, she felt her father's presence like a ghost at her shoulder. "Gentlemen," she began, pulling up her presentation, "I've completed my analysis of our current systems." The room was attentive. They trusted her now. She'd earned it, fought harder for it than any of them knew. "What I've found is concerning. There are critical vulnerabilities in every major system. Communication, finance, physical security, all of them have the same flaw." Kang Minho leaned forward. "Explain." "They were designed to fail. By my father." She let that sink in before continuing. "The architect built back doors into everything. Master codes that could shut down the entire operation. And I've found them all." The room erupted in chaos. Bosses shouted questions and accusations. Kang Minho's hand moved toward his gun. But Amara held up a remote control. "Before you do anything rash, understand this. I've already deployed a dead man's switch. If I don't enter a code every 24 hours, everything I've found gets sent to law enforcement, so you need me alive and cooperative." Kang Minho's eyes were cold as ice. "You're threatening us?" "I'm negotiating." Amara's voice was steady despite her hammering heart. "I'll close the back doors, redesign the systems to be truly secure. In exchange, you let me walk away when it's done. No pursuit, no retaliation, just freedom." "Why should we trust you to actually secure the systems? You could leave more back doors." Amara smiled, and in that smile was all her father's. "Cunning. Because unlike my father, I don't want to be part of this world. I don't want your money or your power. I just want out. And the only way you'll believe that is if I prove it by giving you security so airtight that even I can't break it." The logic was perfect. The bosses argued for hours, but eventually they agreed. They had no choice. Over the next 6 months, Amara rebuilt everything her father had created. She closed every back door and designed new systems without fatal flaws. She worked 18-hour days, driven by a single goal: freedom. And when she was finally done, when every system had been tested and verified, Kang Min-ho called her to his office one last time. "You've upheld your end," he said. "We'll uphold ours. But understand this. If you ever speak about what you know, if you ever come back into this world, the deal is void." "I understand." Amara stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Can I ask you something? Did you ever find out why my father really left?" Kang Min-ho was quiet for a long moment. "We tortured someone who knew him. Before he died, he said the architect had a daughter, that he'd started having nightmares about what would happen if she grew up in this world. A black girl in Korea, in the criminal underworld. He knew what that would mean. The danger, the isolation, the violence. So he destroyed his life's work to save hers." Amara felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away. "Thank you for telling me." She walked out of that building for the last time with nothing but the clothes on her back and a bank account her father had set up years ago, finally accessible now with the codes she'd found. She bought a small house by the ocean, far from Seoul. She got a dog. She spent her days solving puzzles for legitimate security companies, using her skills to protect instead of imprison. And every night she thought about her father and the choice he'd made, to leave behind power and wealth for something more valuable: his daughter's freedom. She'd made the same choice. And though the path had been twisted and dark, she'd found her way to the same destination he'd intended for her all along. A quiet life, a safe life, a free life. The janitor girl who'd solved the impossible puzzle in 30 seconds had finally solved the hardest puzzle of all: how to escape the very cage her brilliance had unlocked. As she watched the sunset over the ocean, she whispered to the wind and her father's memory, "I understand now, Dad. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to teach us when to walk away." And for the first time in 15 years, Amara slept without nightmares. The weight of her inheritance finally lifted from her shoulders. She'd walked through fire and come out free, a black woman who'd outsmarted an empire and lived to tell the tale, even if she'd never speak a word of it to anyone. Her father had given her the tools. She'd used them to forge her own path. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all.